Over the last couple of years, there's been a fair bit of discussion surrounding the word Latinx, which is almost exclusively used in the USA as a supposedly more inclusive version of the older term Latino, used to describe people of Latin American origin or ancestry there. According to polls, only 25% of people who identify as Latino in the USA have actually heard of the term before, and just 3% use it. So it's clear that it hasn't quite picked up steam there. That much is true. There is a pretty popular narrative surrounding it, however, that the term Latinx is some sort of imposition on the Spanish language from English speakers who erroneously see its grammatical gender as discriminatory against everyone other than men. A kind of linguistic imperialism, so to speak. You might have heard that argument before, or maybe even seen this meme that expresses pretty much exactly that sentiment. The problem is that that's simply not true. Now, it is certainly true that a fair few well-meaning but perhaps very misguided English speakers have picked up this term and applied it far more broadly than it tends to be used in Spanish, and that this can come off as quite performative or even annoying at times. But gender-neutral language, or lenguaje inclusivo as it's called in Spanish, is absolutely a real thing that was actually invented in Spanish-speaking countries other than the USA by actual, real, bona fide native Spanish speakers. And it's used by millions of them every single day. I'm going to put some examples on the screen here to show you this. Here is the X ending being used at a protest against anti-LGBT violence in Argentina. Here is the X ending being used in graffiti in Colombia. Here is a high school graduation hoodie in Argentina on which the kids chose to use the E. Here is a sign in Spain explaining how to use the E ending. Here's someone holding up a sign advocating for the use of gender-neutral language in Argentina, which uses the E. And here's a sign at a protest for abortion rights in Argentina, using the E ending. And that's just some examples that I found on Google Images in like a minute. Personally, I live in Argentina and I could go outside right now and probably within a few blocks I'd see a poster or something that has gender-neutral language used in it. And just to prove that point, I actually went out and found some usage of gender-neutral language about 5 minutes from my house, with the X form being used in some of these vegan posters. Now, people who use this gender-neutral language may not actually use the word Latinx very often, or even at all, but that's not them rejecting its use because they see it as an imposition by English speakers who want to impose the gay agenda on Spanish or whatever. It's rather simply because outside the USA, it's pretty rare to see people identify as Latino in the first place, hence it's just not used. Now, this gender-neutral language is certainly not used by the majority by any means, but it's also something that's been gaining in popularity over the years, and this trend is likely to continue into the future. And aside from those who use it, most people just really don't care, which makes perfect sense because it literally just doesn't affect them negatively at all. It's only really made into a big issue by the political far right, who really just oppose it on the grounds that they tend to oppose pretty much anything to do with LGBT people or women's rights anyway. In Spanish-speaking countries that are more on the socially progressive end of the spectrum, such as Chile, Argentina, Spain, and Uruguay, it's quite common to see this sort of language being used, especially in writing. The X as a replacement for A and O is mostly used in writing, since it's pretty much unpronounceable. The idea is that the reader can read it as a sort of blank character and replace it with whatever they want in their own mind, thus being more inclusive. E as a neutral ending is also very popular, used both in writing and in speech, due to the fact that it's actually pronounceable. This ending is particularly important for non-binary people, as unlike in English, where only pronouns are really gendered, most Spanish nouns and adjectives are gendered. Yet in the traditional binary between A for a woman or a girl, and O for a man or a boy, there's clearly just no room there for people who don't want to identify strongly with either option. Hence it can actually be really useful at times. In traditional Spanish, when referring to a group of people of mixed gender, you'd use the masculine O form always. Some people consider this to be a kind of sexist, patriarchal norm that takes men as like the default. Thus, when addressing groups, they choose to use the E ending instead, or maybe the X ending if we're talking about writing. Or at the very least, they'll use one of those forms when they know that there are gender diverse people present in the group. So yes, gender-neutral language is an actual thing that is used by many Spanish speakers in actual Spanish-speaking countries. Millions of them, in fact, at the very least. It is not an imposition by English speakers in the USA. Language is not set in stone, it's not something that needs to be protected in a supposedly pure form. It's something that evolves. And as new words or grammar or modifications to previous forms of language are needed, as circumstances change, we invent them. That's simply what's happening here. At the very least, the majority of people in the LGBT communities in the previously mentioned countries use gender-neutral language at least a little bit, so it's clearly something that the actual communities in question are finding quite useful. When marginalized communities come up with a solution to solve a problem that they're facing, perhaps we should listen to them rather than immediately knee-jerk react and assume that they're agents of some sort of gay linguistic conspiracy being led by Anglophones from the USA. Now, personally, I pretty rarely actually use gender-neutral language in Spanish, nor do I expect others to use it, and especially not in speech. However, I understand perfectly that the reality is that many other people do use it, millions in fact, which is already more than enough for it to be properly considered a real existing linguistic phenomenon. When someone requests that I use it, or they've told me that they want me to, I absolutely do use it though, because why not? Just like addressing someone with different pronouns in English, it's very easy to simply address someone with an E at the end of nouns, pronouns, and adjectives, rather than an O or an A. And this is especially important for non-binary people, as I just mentioned. But yeah, so to conclude, no, gender-neutral language in Spanish is not an imposition from anyone but actual Spanish speakers themselves. Spanish speakers who are part of a historically and currently still marginalized minority who are simply trying to deal with an issue that affects them. There's a lot more to the world than just annoying, performatively woke liberals in the USA. Please don't over-extrapolate just because you find them annoying. Thanks for watching, see ya! Just a quick and short one today, to correct some fairly commonly peddled misinformation that I've been seeing. Unfortunately, it seems like a lot of Latin American descended people in the USA especially think that they can speak for all Spanish speakers, despite sometimes not being very familiar with what's actually going on in majority Spanish-speaking countries. And that seems to be where this conception came from. Americans, so-called Latinos, extrapolating their own rejection of this term to mean that all gender-neutral language in Spanish is some sort of imposition by English speakers or something. Anyway, so if you like this video, make sure to subscribe, and if you really liked it, consider supporting me monetarily on Patreon or on Ko-fi. Now I'd just like to thank all of my patrons, and especially my $25 plus patrons: Jesse Hosick, Mischief and Fins, Arthur Simac Jones, Evan Carroll, Darcius B, Benny G, A Big Mean Cat, Shub, William Tomlinson, Kareem, Brandon Flowers, Pote, Brosnan, Jel Cribson, and my $10 plus patrons: Naomi Starlight, Cab the Bird Ranger, Insurgente, Commissar Fartshorn, Justin Bailey 77, Zanguzeng, Uminya Kresneti, Abdullah Ki, Average is Awesome, Can't Care Less, JG, Cincione Bresgal, Nico Del Sesto, Melissa Gomez, George Rosenbaum, Christian Corniels, Naomi Starlight, Roja, Industrial Robot, Crouton and Baguette, Violet Rain, Michael Strauss, Esfer Pierre-Louis, Mamushin, and Revis. See you next time!